Mark chapter 10, verses 35 through 45. We're given some marvelous vignettes of things and encounters and experiences that Jesus had in that extraordinary 3-year period that was his ministry here on earth. Mark chapter 10, verse 35. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." Now, what's your response if your children or grandchildren come to you with that? "We want you to do whatever we ask." Maybe, we'll see. And Jesus said to them, verse 36, "What is it you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" They replied, "We are able." Then Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." Now, when the 10 heard of this, the other disciples, they began to be angry with James and with John. So Jesus called them together and said to them, "You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. But whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." The words of Christ for the people of God. In thanksgiving, we give God praise. Let us pray. God, we identify with James and John. There are times when we want to feel that gift of privilege. And yet, help us to remember that that gift is a gift in service to others, and that there is so much you would want to do through us if our hearts remain open and our hands remain willing. Amen. Well, feeling like they have a special connection to Jesus, James and John try to parlay their privilege into positions of influence and respect and authority. Jesus assures them that they have a place in his kingdom, but teaches them that that privilege is a gift for serving others, perhaps even for giving one's life for another. On Thanksgiving Day in 1968, I was the ripe old age of 5 years old, and I was sitting once more at the kids' table instead of the grown-ups' table. I felt like it had been that way for 50 years. "When will I graduate to the big table?" I lamented and complained while waiting for leftover fixings that would come down from the table up there. My lament was understandable. The grown-ups table got everything first, the best of the best. The grown-ups table was where all the visitors were, except for one cousin that was at the kids' table who I didn't get along with too well. And the kids' table never got to have their first choice of pie. Probably the blueberry pie would be gone before it ever got to me. Now, when Jesus told his disciples, "Unless you become like a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven," I don't think he had my Thanksgiving attitude in mind. But if we're honest, all of us like a bit of privilege. All of us like a bit of feeling special, an opportunity to be distinguished in some way. And this was certainly true of James and John in our gospel reading this morning. Or maybe I should say James and John's mom, because in the Gospel of Matthew, it is their mother, actually, with them by her side, who comes and kneels before Jesus and puts the request to him. Declare that these two sons of mine will sit, one at your right and one at your left, when you come into your kingdom. You don't know what you are asking, Jesus replies. Can you drink the cup which I drink? Can you be baptized with the baptism that I will be baptized with? We can. We're able. We will, they reply. Now the cup which Jesus will drink and the baptism which Jesus will be baptized with is crucifixion on a cross. I don't think James and John or their mom quite had that in mind. Do they really want to experience that? Being set apart for privilege or for power or authority is one thing. Singled out for torture, well, that's something else again. No blueberry pie, thank you very much. Throughout the rest of their lives, James and John will learn more about the costs of following Jesus than they can possibly imagine. They will feel the scrape of thorns as they embrace the rose of discipleship. For along with the blessings, there are sorrows associated with genuine service and authentic love. There is little doubt that Jesus is right in saying they don't know what it is they ask for. But what are they asking for precisely? Perhaps they ask, you do feel a special connection with us, don't you, Jesus? Or perhaps they ask, you do see that we have leadership skills which can be of great benefit to your God-inspired agenda, don't you? Or perhaps they ask, we have earned your respect and right to govern by your side, haven't we? Or maybe they say, we have your back more than the others do. Help us, help you. Or whatever the motives, they believe the perks outweigh the demerits of what they are asking for. Now, there's nothing wrong with needing affirmation. We all need that, especially from those we love most. And we cannot generously give the unique, wonderful gift of self to others until we find assurance that we are unique and wonderful to God and to ourselves and to those we love the deepest. I call this finding a place at the table. The day did come, in 1968, not then, but a couple of years later, when I graduated to the grown-ups table, and quite honestly, there have been many days since when I wish I could go back. But the reality is not everyone has a place at either table. I would love, for example, to see one of the chairs of our church council, which meets the first Thursday of each month, occupied by a teenager. We need to hear that voice. Our decisions as a church would be that much better. We would all benefit from hearing a woman's voice preaching from the pulpit more frequently, or from experiencing the leadership of a female president, perhaps. Our church would be blessed, for example, if some of our Somali refugee neighbors were praising God right here with us in a service such as this. There are many who are not at the table of God, and there are many who are not at the table of the United Methodist Church of Auburn. And those of us who are here who have the privilege of being at the table can invite them and encourage them to be a part of our journey. The privilege we have calls us to serve and to make sure that everyone has a place at the table of Christ. Incidentally, affirmation of our place at God's table comes in lots of different forms. I was blessed this past Friday when 3 parishioners, Joel Irish and Carol Agers and Brenda Bisson, came to the parsonage to put up a fence for our dogs. Now, I don't think any of the 3 have ever really met our dogs. And I'm quite sure that each of them probably had something better to do with a Friday afternoon than come to the parsonage and help Pastor Steve by putting up a fence for his dogs. Still, they surrendered that time, that talent, in order to make their pastor's life a little easier. And I was deeply blessed by their gifts of time and talent and the chocolate chip cookies that Brenda bought, which were so delicious. And so were the dogs when they raced around the perimeter of their new enclosure like crazy. Freedom from captivity. Through Joel, Carol, and Brenda, I felt embraced by all of you, like you are glad to have me at your table of Thanksgiving. Now, when the other 10 disciples found out about what James and John and their mother were asking of Jesus, when they discovered that they were trying to influence Jesus' cabinet-making decisions, they were not happy campers. Their response was something like this: "Who died and made you boss? What makes you think you should have the privilege of sitting at the master's side when he begins to rule? We're just as good as you, just as important to Jesus, just as able to lead." Cognizant of their grumbling, Jesus saw this as a teachable moment. It was for them, and it is for us. Jesus called the disciples together, saying, "Those with authority in this world exercise it over those who do not have authority. But that is not the kingdom way. Whoever wants to be great among you will be your servant. Whoever wants to be first among you will be slave to all. For the human one didn't come to be served, but rather to serve and to give his life to liberate many people." Jesus not only said this, he lived it. He died for it too. When you think, as the Hebrews writer does, theologically about this request from James and John and their mother, it's almost worthy of an episode of The Twilight Zone. They asked to sit at the right hand of Jesus, the second person of the Trinity, who left the throne of heaven, left the presence of God, left the power and authority that was there, in order to be born in a Bethlehem stable and to be placed in a manger for a crib. Left all that privilege behind in order to come and sit at the kids' table with the kids, waiting for the leftover fixings, waiting for the pie that might not ever come. He left it all to sit there. And the only crown that Jesus would ever receive in this life was a crown of thorns. The author of Hebrews puts it like this: "In the same way, Christ also didn't promote himself. During his days on earth, Christ offered prayers, loud cries, tears as sacrifices to the one who was able to save him from death. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered, becoming the source of eternal salvation for everyone who obeys him. He was appointed to be a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek, the gold standard of priests. of the Scriptures. What does it look like to sit at the right hand of Jesus? It looks like service. It looks like sacrifice. Sharing one's resources and substance so that others might have resources and substance. And honestly, we see it every day. I see it when Gladys Chapman sits with a grieving family, agreeing to serve cream cheese with olive and moxie because that was the favorite of the deceased. I see it when Carrie Coppin sings and plays guitar with little ones dancing around her singing, "All God's creatures got a place in the choir." I see it when I'm visiting with parishioners who say, "I was having a really difficult day, and then Sherry Downing came and visited." Or, "I received a lovely card from Sharon McGilvery." Or, "I was deeply touched by the prayers that were offered for my family." You see, sometimes service takes us to a cross. Sometimes it takes us to the coffee pot to offer hospitality and a listening ear. Let's pray. God, we thank you for your presence with us. We thank you for inviting us to your table. Help us to look around and see who is not at it with us. And help us to go. Invite them to join in. In the joy of Christ we pray. Amen. I am deeply thankful to all of you who have given or pledged to give over 3 years to the Seeds of Faith campaign.